Hello everyone. So I'll preface this video by saying that this book that I read coincided with some health problems, and unfortunately that made the book sort of difficult to read. I did have some problems with the stories in this collection. There's quite a few of them. There's quite a few stories rather, but eventually I did come around to it, and I definitely enjoyed it. There's a lot of good stuff in here. It's very complex work. I think there's about 26 or 27 stories. I might have miscounted. I believe it's 26 I've got here in my notes. So there's quite a lot to cover here. And usually my reviews for short story collections go on quite a bit, so I'll try to be more succinct. So this is To Drown in Dark Water by a Yorkshireman. So it's good to finally read someone from the UK. I tend to find that a lot of horror and weird fiction is written by Americans. So Steve Toase, or Toase if I'm pronouncing that correctly, he's a English writer now living in Munich, I believe, in Germany. And it's interesting because that's definitely reflected in the stories. Some stories are set in England, some stories are set in Germany and surrounding environs. This is an interesting one for me. Again, I like to connect books with each other. This is for me and make connections. This feels like the Yorkshireman's Richard Gavin. It really does feel like Richard Gavin in many respects. Especially the earlier stories feel quite poetic and almost esoteric as well. So, interestingly, I had no idea what to expect from this book. I should say as well, so an aside, this is also by Undertow Publications, which is Richard Gavin's Grotesquerie, was Undertow as well. Anyway, I didn't know what to expect, and I was quite surprised to find out that this book is very ecological, and that's obviously interesting for me because that's what I studied for 5 years. And I really had no idea what to expect, and every single one of these stories has a nature element. These are very much rustic stories. They're folk horror. They're ecological. There's some dystopian elements as well, sci-fi. They all come back around to sort of nature. And I'm not quite sure about Steve's background, but he seems to have a fondness for nature, at least. It's interesting. That's a pro and a con. I found that the stories did get a little bit samey in that regard. They're all related to nature, and you can just expect a nature element. So I think just as I'm looking at my notes, I usually have a lot to say about short story collections. I'm going to rattle off some things here. In terms of the cons, first of all, just broadly, a lot of the stories are nature based. A lot of the stories have similar names, so a lot of the females will have names beginning with S. I found that quite strange. I think it's Sabina or Sabine. I'm not quite sure. I should know how to pronounce Sabina or Sabine. Sophia, Sarah. I believe there's another one as well. I'm not quite sure why all the names begin with S, but that's just a small thing. Again, many of the stories begin to feel similar. I will say, in terms of the just to sort of set up this issue, a lot of the stories, the endings feel somewhat, it's a bit harsh to say rushed. This is a masterful writer. I just want to say a masterful writer. Of course he is. It's just that some of the endings feel a little bit rushed and maybe unmotivated as well. I'll get into why that I personally think that is. There's also an element of weirdness for weirdness' sake, which I just don't find that engaging, because it just feels like there's no coherence and no meaning to it. But again, this is all just, I need to give examples for that to make sense. And a lot of the stories are very structurally similar as well. There's a lot of scene breaks, a lot in these stories, and they begin to feel a little bit similar. It's definitely a technique that Steve's fond of employing, where we just have maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs scene break, 2 or 3 paragraphs scene break. Of course, there are stories that don't have scene breaks, but you definitely notice it. another sort of structural similarity as well is I found that the sentence structures are also, not to take away from the masterful prose, but they do feel a little bit similar as well, where he'll break up sentences into fragments. You'll have to see what I mean. I might give an excerpt, but you'll have to read it for yourself to see what I mean. So hopefully that's just the cons. I've got a lot of good stories to talk about. There's a lot in here actually. I've had to omit quite a few of them. And the last thing I've got here is that some of the stories do tend to drift a little bit. There's a story, I can't quite remember the name, there's a lot of stories in here. I think it's something to do with rot, one of the stories. And it just seems to go from place to place, and then it suddenly just, everything picks up in almost in the last page or two. So that's another sort of issue that I did find with some of the stories. But Call Out is it's about a man called out to investigate the strange birth of I think it's a calf, in a farm shed. It actually reminded me of a time I spent in the Highlands of Scotland for 3 weeks in a farmhouse up in the Highlands in the mountains, and there was a Highland cow that gave birth. Very similar actually. And I don't want to say too much about these stories because I'll go on for about 40 minutes. I think the Cisco collection was about 40 minutes. Strong characterization, folk elements, very good intro. This is a very, very solid story. I had no problems with it at all. The ending is suitably vague. It's just an all-round good story. You can definitely tell it's that sort of Yorkshireman. I think it's actually set in Yorkshire. Really, really good story. Dryland is let me just see if I can find it here. I actually read this selection not in. I usually just read stuff in chronological order, but I sort of skipped around a little bit. For example, if I was feeling sort of unwell or just had some problems, I would just skip to a shorter one, and this was a shorter one that I read. This is Dry Land, a bit of flash fiction. This is brilliant. It actually inspired one of my own flashes recently. There's no character, there's no real plot. It's just maybe about 5 short paragraphs, and it's a just prose poem basically about these men that drown and they sort of spew up or vomit out seawater, despite the fact that they're not close to the sea, if I remember correctly. And it's just incredible. And just because it's a flash, I'll just read that a little bit quickly. The men drowned, though they were nowhere near the depths of the sea, their chests filled with salt heavy water, bloated with ebbing seaweed that swelled on their throats. The women tried to clear the lungs of the choking, turned the men on their sides, their recovery position remembered from school, on their fronts, ribs splintered against cobbles and curbs. Still the water came, torrented past shattered teeth. In desperation the women clogged mouths with towels and torn shirts, clothed them with cotton wool and stitches, closed them. They no longer cared to bring the men to breathing. They were past saving. Now they just wanted to stem the flood they knew was coming. I won't read the last paragraph. So yeah, this is it's very evocative once you read the ending, and it's just something that stuck in my mind. That's Dry Land, a little bit of flash fiction. Green Grows the Grief. I love these titles. A very sort of striking investigation of grief, as you can probably tell from the title. A daughter mourns her horticulturalist father, I believe it is, gardener. He used to work in the greenhouse quite a lot. And I won't say too much than that. It's very striking and haunting and atmospheric, and it's about obsession. I had no real problem with this one. I'm just looking at my notes. There's a lot of stuff here. It's just one of those slow stories. It feels like there's no real issue with the pacing. It's meant to be slow and sort of plodding and introspective. That one's good as well. Green Grows the Grief. Usually I do excerpts for all of these, but I think I'll just choose a few choice ones because I'll go on forever. Children of the Rotting Straw. This is. So I said that the stories were similar. That's not really the case, because they're similar in the sense that they're mostly to do with nature. However, the Children of the Rotting Straw it almost reminds me of Neil Gaiman in a way. The strange, otherworldly scene.
where it's a mother and a daughter looking up at the sky, and the sky is interwoven with sticks, almost like tree trunk sized sticks, and there's colourful yarn coming out of the gaps in the sticks, this sort of weave of branches. And there's elements of the scarecrow, and it reminds me of Jack and the Beanstalk. Definitely reminds me of that. I don't know if that was an influence. Yeah, just really good imagery. I don't have any problems with the story really. The ending was it's a weird one. It's definitely a weird one. The ending is very cyclical, and I found that quite enjoyable and satisfying. It's a weird one. Yeah. I think it's the odd one out in terms of just how weird it is and how different it is. Children of the Rotting Straw. Skin like carapace. All these names are really quite good. This one, it almost defies description. It's about this. It almost feels like a fantasy world building story where should look at my notes. A human civilization that lives in this land or realm called the Land of No Light. I believe it is. I read some of these stories quite a while ago as well, so forgive me if I'm forgetting some details or misremembering. The Land of No Light, and they seem to these seemingly human characters seem to rely on just the sense of smell, sort of olfactory sense, and they also have this strange custom where they feel each other's faces and arms and torsos, and where they seem to have glyphs or sigils carved into their flesh, which is seemingly flesh. I never quite figured that one out actually. It seems to be flesh. Again, I'm always wary that I give too much details for these stories. I want to leave it at that. It's a very... There's actually a story that I was thinking of reading. It's reminded me. There's a famous classic story, I think, where I think it's set in France, where this blind person can only experience Paris through his sense of smell. It reminded me of that just all of a sudden. I think it's called Perfume. I think it's by Suskind, I think. Anyway. So that's Skin Like Carapace. It feels very in depth, and it almost feels like it could be a novel in and of itself. So that's a really good one. Beneath the Forest's Wilting Leaves. Let's see if I've got that title correct. So I sort of jotted these down. Yep. There's a lot of stories I'm missing here, by the way. This one actually reminded me of Blackwood a lot. I can't remember the name of it. The Man Whom the Trees Loved. In a sense that we're just out in the woods, and it's just two people most of the time. And it's just about a father-son relationship, and they're just the father and son are just building this hut in the woods, and it seems to be they progress on it, and then this strange it's strange because the hut is added to over time, and they don't work on it, is what I'm trying to say. And it's just that it's a really sort of heartfelt and again introspective story. The ending as well was quite satisfying. There are a few which I probably will get into where the endings just didn't seem that great to me, and I just felt very lackluster. But again, this one as well, it's another slow and introspective one. But again, it definitely worked. These are definitely my favourite stories. So there's quite a few. I think I was just now that I look at these, I'm definitely fond of them. I just think that it was sort of distorted by the issues that I've had. I will go into some that I did find quite negative, but hopefully it sort of balances it out. You can see that I'm definitely enjoyed some of these. Why this? Let me just get this name. Why the sea tastes of salt and why the moon always looks toward us. This is another flash fiction piece. It's about this witch that is enamoured of the moon. It almost reads like it's a mythology explaining natural phenomena, I suppose. So I just want to read a little bit of this. I should have read some of the other ones out. I might do that later, but it's just easy with flash fiction to just read a little bit of an excerpt. The witch of the red house fell in love with the moon. With no wings to lift her through the sky, she went to the marsh and asked the stagnant waters for advice. The drowning pools gurgled with the voice of slit throats and of the bog crushed. You must slip off your skin, lay it by the north wall of your house at the new moon. Until the full moon, scrape the fat from the inside of your hide, the hair from the outside, and shape both into a candle. When the full moon rises, light the candle, and your skin will become a carpet of honeysuckle and magnolia to carry you to your beloved. When the new moon came, the witch of the red house peeled off her skin, stemming her blood with salt, the agony making her choke out the names of all 5 dead gods. I want to read more, but I don't want to give spoilers. There's a really good section at the end. Atelier, or Atelier, I'm probably my Scottish pronunciation, Atelier. This was one that intrigued me very much. Fortunately, the end felt kind of lackluster, and I don't really see how the imagery connects. I might actually give spoilers for this one. I think I do that in some reviews where I feel like I need to give spoilers I just want to hint. I feel like it's no good saying this is bad, the endings are bad, and not actually giving more concrete details for why that might be. So this story is about a woman who meets a troubled artist, another female artist, and this female artist is forced to paint for a strange client. Now the intro of this story reminded me of Sabatto's The Tunnel, which is one of my favourite books. Wonder if Steve Toase has read that. So the clients. Okay, so I'm gonna skip ahead a couple of minutes because I'm gonna give some spoilers for this story. Unfortunately the ending to this story I didn't quite understand. So it's revealed after this. So the frame story is that the artist, this female artist, sort of quite anxiety-driven artist, is relating the story to this art lover. They both meet at a gallery, and they sit at a cafe, and the artist tells the art lover all about what's happened to her and why she won't survive the night. And it's revealed after the artist spends some time with the patron, and this patron, she never really sees who he or she or it or they is until the end. And it seems that this patron has a sort of a grill, like a metal grill over the eyes. It reminds me of a Gavin story with a copper wire. I can't remember the story. So the patron has this grill over the eyes, and this sort of skin seems to sort of drip from the face. And that's not quite explained to me. I got the sense that it might be something to do with an investigation into the troubles and the rules of making art and the sort of restrictions. Especially because there's also another element where there are there's this woman or a group of people that are clothed in black and white, and she has this seemingly a dead body hunched over her shoulders. And I've read the story and I don't actually know what that sort of signifies. I think it might be a case, this is probably completely off, but it might be a case where it's the weirdness and the unexplained nature of the story is supposed to be like that because sometimes you're just given rules and regulations and they don't quite make sense, especially if you're making art of any type. That's what I got from it. At least probably has no bearing on this, or no connection with what Steve actually wanted the story to be. Or maybe I just missed something completely, but something of the viewing of the art and the patron and the eyes and the unexplained nature of these people that the artist meets. I don't know, I'm going on quite a bit for this story, but I'll leave it there. I very much enjoyed the relationship between the art lover and the artist. So that was Atelier, if that's pronounced correctly. So dancing sober in the dust. This is actually perhaps my favourite story. I will read some parts from this. It's about a historian fascinated by a historical dance group called, I believe it's Die Schliedertanzen or Schiedlertanzen. My German is crap. I do try and sing some German songs sometimes, like Die Winterreise and Die Stadt and whatnot, Schubert. That aside, these reviews are getting quite conversational nowadays. I love this story. It's fantastic. It reminded me of Ligotti. Definitely reminded me of Ligotti. His art, I can't remember what it's called. Actually, it's Teatro Grotesco, the Theatre Grotesque, the group itself. This is excellent. We have this. I love the way it's structured. We'll have this. There are 11 costumes that these it's a husband and wife duo, and there are these costumes that they wore throughout their sort of their performance days in the 1920s, and they get increasingly more. It's extreme art. It's the costumes are painful to wear, and they're quite unsettling to look at as well. And the historian is fascinated by this, and the way it's structured is brilliant because we go through each 11 costumes, and the story progresses and it ends on the 11. If you might have guessed that, hopefully that's not a spoiler, but it's really well structured. And the way that each costume is described and introduced is brilliant. Really, I think it is one of my favourite short stories in the collection, or possibly this year as well. And the ending, and we so much to say. The progression of this historian character, this theatre historian, is fantastic as well. Really quite unsettling. So I'll just find the story. Just read a bit of it. The inside of the masks are rough with nails and wire. I push my hand inside. Raw metal snags my skin, adding new blood to old. I place the head mask to one side and take the leg piece out of the wooden trunk. Built from cardboard and skin, it has been made heavy with plaster of Paris and encased bandages that healed no one. I lay in position, followed by the arms and body piece. The gauze dice stare at me, daring me to try on the outfit. I ignore its challenge and continue to empty the crate. And then it goes on to a description of the first costume, the Schlafmann, the sleeping man outfit. 1923, gypsum, cardboard and house paint. The Schlafmann is a costume made to be worn during the dance at the Dream of the Still Sea. While the dancer appeared on stage wearing the costume, the first act is for him to be sewn into the outfit. The stitches run up the back across the slash representing the mouth, and through the eyes reducing visibility to very narrow slits. The dance is then performed purely in response to the locations of sounds performed by the second dancer, representing the still sea. That is the tamest, by far, of the costumes, and I will read another one later on. I think that's just to give an idea of it's to ease you in, basically. I just love the way the story is written. It's very stern. The characters in this, the historian and the museum owner, I think it is, or curator. Their back and forth is quite biting, acerbic. I'll go for another tame one as well, just because it's don't want to give too much spoilers for the great costumes in this. Die Frau der Weiden, the Women of the Willows, outfit 1929, copper wire, stone, gauze and velvet curtains. One of the last costumes Sabina and Jokan made, Die Frau der Weiden, is also one of the most elaborate. Each length of copper wire has been knotted to create some kind of approximation of willow branches. The detailed choreography found in the archive accompanying the costumes shows the complex performance was designed to create sound and not just movement. As with all the later costumes designed by the Schiedler Tanzen, the interior provides no padding or protection for the dancer, and the sharp copper wire would have been incredibly uncomfortable for the performer. Indeed, one contemporary report describes visiting the backstage area after the performance to find Jokan's body covered in slashes, blood seeping down to collect on the floor. Just a brilliant story, and the ending is excellent. Grenzen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. A lot of stories in here. I'm already at 30 minutes. Grenzen, I really did enjoy the build-up in this. The ending, however, is another one where I found it sort of anticlimactic and a little bit odd. I might go into why that is. So it's about a father and a his wife actually might be divorced, actually, ex-wife, and their daughter as well. They're going over the border. They're going over the. I think it's the border from West Berlin to East Berlin. I think it is, or the other way around. Quite hazy on that. And it's really a simple story where there's quite a lot of anxiety because obviously they have the Stasi and whatnot, and they have to go through all the checks, security checks, and the kid is playing up in the back of the car and whatnot. And there's a really good foreshadowing in this story. I don't want to give. That's all I'll say in terms of the basics of the story. I do want to give some more concrete detail for why the story didn't really work for me in terms of the ending. So, again, another spoiler, so you'll just have to skip a couple of minutes. So at the end, the daughter goes missing, and she eventually meets this strange woodland being. That's really well foreshadowed with this. She's making clay figures in the background of the car. I think she's drawn things as well, and the father turns around and says, "That's a spiky man or human," and with thorns. And it's of course it's later revealed that she might have actually seen one in the forest that they're driving past. This strange woodland creature, and it's a bit odd because at the end it seems to have it takes a cannibalistic turn where the daughter seems to not mind at all that she's actually eating her father. And I just didn't see the connection with that. I think the story Grenzen is called. It actually means borders or limits, so that's quite limits, obviously cannibalism and whatnot. I just didn't feel like the connection was that strong or coherent. It seems odd to me that all of a sudden the daughter would just say, "Look, Daddy, I don't feel like eating too much, so we'll have a lot more time to play." Or spend time together, and she says this as she's sitting with this woodland creature over the fire. And I think the father is suspended in a cage, and so is the wife, the mother. I think his hand has been lost, and actually eating his hand. And I just found it quite unbelievable that she would say that. Maybe there's some sort of magical aspect where the woodland creature sort of altered her perception or mind or whatever. I just felt like it was a little bit odd and off. But aside from that, it's a good story. Now, the last one that I found really good, and actually most of these stories in retrospect are good and they definitely have stuff going for them. The Jaws of Ouroboros. I did not expect to, I think usually I wouldn't enjoy this sort of thing, just the nature of the characters in this story, but I found this fascinating. The conceit of the story is, I almost got the sense that Steve passed Stonehenge one time. Not an inconceivable occurrence. And he thought, what if Stonehenge suddenly started whirring and became like this grinding mouth? And that's as much as I'm going to really say, because that's quite I need to get better at avoiding spoilers. And there's an element here that's just fantastically thought out. It's just, what if the things that came into that I try to avoid spoilers. What if the things that went into that ended up in sort of a trade? It became almost like a Dune-esque space element. It's really grotesque in that way, and it almost seems. It almost seems heightened in a way, because we have this grinding stone, the strange phenomenon of the grinding stone, and then the fact that it could be capitalized in such a way is fascinating. And also, I'll say that in terms of the heightened nature of it, I definitely feel one of the things though that I didn't enjoy is that the antagonist in this story is a little bit cartoonish. He's definitely engaging. I just found him a little bit maybe like a cartoon villain at times. But I think that's all I'll say for that one. It's just really good. That's the last story in the collection. A really good, strong ending point. And I'll say, just reminded myself that the title is perfect because it's another cyclical story, and I love the way the ending turned out. So we've been running on for a little bit. I think I'm going to... as I say, there's a lot of stories in here. There's Dirt Upon My Skin, there's a Cromwell Gambit, Winter Home, Not All the Coal That Is Burned, Warms the World, I think it is. There's Split, Chain, Stitch, I think. There's a whole bunch of them. I'll quickly cover a couple that I didn't enjoy. Just briefly, because I'm always going too far. I can't pronounce the name of this story. I think it means orchard in German. Strubutzweiss, I think it is. Now, I've said that all these stories are pretty great and they all have stuff going for them. Unfortunately, I found the second story in the collection. I believe it is the second story. I found it a little bit insufferable, unfortunately. I found it quite obnoxious in the way that it's written. A bit pretentious, unfortunately. It's like a Richard Gavin story, but not as well executed. I felt like it was a little bit... I find it a little bit grating the way it was written. This might just be personal preference. I don't know. I usually like these sort of slow introspective stories, but the way it was written, I just did not connect with at all. And to be honest, I've written down here that by the end of it, I actually didn't know who the characters really were, where they were, and what they want. It's unfortunate. I'll try to find a good example. No, this isn't the best example, but I will try and go on a little bit more. Why I didn't enjoy the story, but we drive into the town. It's the first time Kate has left home in 5 years. She sits in the back, the window closed, even though the day is one of the hottest of the year. I can smell myself on the recycled air inside the car. I turn us down the main street. People are sitting under parasols, drinking ice-crowded drinks and eating chemical-flavoured ice cream. They're staring, Kate says, shrinking down in her seat. They're not, I lie. It's far too warm to pay attention to anyone else. But she does not believe me. My lies are brittle children, and they do not live long around her. That's perfectly fine. I think it's one of those ones where you have to read it to really understand what I'm trying to get across. Unfortunately, it's very plodding in the way that it's written. There's a lot of scene breaks, and it seems to just go from thing to thing. And the characters are very almost robotic and stilted in a way. They all speak like almost like everything that happens, it just doesn't connect with them in a way. It's a very strange story, and I don't really quite understand what happened. So, there's a few other stories here, but I think I'll just leave it there. There's just a ton of stuff in here. To Drive in a Dark War, I definitely recommend it. I think it's one of the ones that there might be take a break from it every once in a while. I have a habit of reading stuff back to cover. Yeah, I think I definitely would read more Steve Toase or Toase. It's just a shame that, again, it coincided with some health problems, and also the fact that it's very nature based, and I'm surprised I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy it, just some of the stories that just didn't connect with that much, and I would have went into them more if I wasn't going on for possibly about 35 minutes already. So hopefully that was a good in-depth review. Hope I didn't spoil too much, and hopefully it sort of piques your interest. But anyway, that was To Drown in Dark Water. Thanks very much. Cheers.